week that the story broke, and we were kind of like mocking the media's treatment of Monica Lewinsky,
Right.
who I knew from a very innocent date.
In 1997, Jake Tapper shared a meal with Monica Lewinsky, and then did something nobody expected. He published the details weeks before the scandal broke. The article used tabloid headlines and jokes that suddenly felt darker when the truth came out. He called her sweet and nice, gave her a grade, and moved on with his life. But that dinner followed him everywhere. It raised uncomfortable questions about timing, knowledge, and what journalists really know before the rest of us. 28 years later, he's ready to tell the full story. And it's not what anyone imagined. Jake Tapper came into the world on March 12, 1969, in New York City. Born on Staten Island to Theodore Tapper and Helen Ann Palmatier. His father, known as Ted, was a Jewish pediatrician who graduated from Dartmouth in 1956 and Harvard Medical School in 1960. He later opened South Philadelphia Pediatrics, where he treated children from low-income families. His mother, Helen, was born in Canada and worked for decades as a psychiatric nurse at the Philadelphia Veterans Affairs Medical Center, caring for war veterans with quiet patience and grace. Soon after Jake was born, the family moved to Queen Village in Philadelphia. Their home was filled with books, long conversations, and a steady sense of purpose. Ted also taught at Jefferson Medical College, and his dedication to serving the poor shaped the way Jake would later see the world. He grew up surrounded by compassion that came from his mother's empathy and drive, that came from his father's discipline, a mix that stayed with him for life. Life in Queen Village was simple, but full of ideas. His parents believed in progressive values and never forced their views on him. They encouraged open talk at the dinner table, where conversations about politics, fairness, and ethics were part of daily life. Jake once described it as hippie parenting, because they cared more about honesty than about strict rules. His parents' curiosity rubbed off on him early, pushing him to ask questions instead of accepting what others said. But when he was 8, everything changed. In 1977, his parents divorced. Jake suddenly found himself living between two worlds. He spent part of his time with his father in Marion, an upper-class suburb, and the other part with his mother in Queen Village, a working-class area with a very different rhythm. That split showed him how people could live in completely different realities within the same city. It taught him empathy and made him listen more carefully to people from all walks of life. Both his parents were Jewish, and faith quietly shaped the family's rhythm. Jake attended Akiba Hebrew Academy, a Jewish day school that blended religious and secular learning. There, he edited the school paper and discovered how much he loved storytelling. By 8th grade, he was already creating a comic strip for a local weekly, inspired by Gary Trudeau's Doonesbury. He liked how humor could reveal truth. In his senior year, a prank cartoon got him suspended and sent to community service, but it also showed his rebellious streak and his willingness to challenge authority. He graduated in 1987 with a sharper sense of justice and a stronger voice. Akiba's pluralistic setting helped him appreciate different opinions and backgrounds, something that became a pillar of his journalism later on. His father's clinic also left a mark on him. Jake grew up watching Ted Tapper treat children who couldn't afford medical care. He saw how his father's compassion went beyond words and how much dignity it brought to families who had little. Those long afternoons in the clinic planted a seed of purpose in him. He understood early that fairness mattered, and that someone had to speak up for those without a voice. That sense of duty stayed inside him, and eventually became the reason he chose journalism over anything else. In 1975, Jake started elementary school at the Philadelphia School, a small and experimental place that didn't follow traditional rules. The school had been open for only 3 years. There were no grades, no tests, and very little homework. Learning happened through projects and field trips. Every week, students rode a bus to Sycamore Farm, where they fed animals and worked outdoors even when the barn was freezing in winter. Jake loved the creative side of it. He remembered one unit where students staged their own gold rush, claiming patches of land and writing stories about them. Another time, they reenacted the Civil War right in the classroom, dividing into North and South. The classroom even had a pet tarantula named Oscar. These years made school feel like an adventure. It sparked his imagination and taught him that curiosity could be its own reward. By the 1980s, Jake was back in Marion for high school at Akiba Hebrew Academy. That was where he began to take journalism seriously. He became the editor of the school newspaper, wrote about his community, and started to explore how writing could reveal truth and build understanding. Debate became his second love. He enjoyed arguing with precision, using facts rather than emotion. That habit of checking every claim would later define his reporting style. During his senior year, he interned for Ed Rendell, who was running for mayor of Philadelphia in 1987. It was his first taste of politics from the inside. That same year, he graduated and headed to Dartmouth College, carrying with him the confidence of a young man who knew how to listen and challenge authority at the same time. At Dartmouth, he majored in history, but added art and visual studies to his focus. He was fascinated by how stories were told through both facts and images. He graduated in 1991 with honors, Phi Beta Kappa, and magna cum laude. But the defining moment came in 1989 when he studied abroad in Prague. He arrived just as the Velvet Revolution began, the streets filled with thousands of people demanding freedom from communist rule. He watched history unfold in real time. Within weeks, a dictatorship collapsed without bloodshed. Standing in Wenceslas Square among the protesters, Jake saw how truth could move people and how quickly power could shift. It shaped his belief that journalism mattered most when it stood beside ordinary citizens rather than above them. Back at Dartmouth, he threw himself into activism. He wrote for the Dartmouth newspaper, covering student protests against apartheid in South Africa. He joined demonstrations demanding that the university cut ties with companies supporting the regime. He also started a comic strip called Static Cling, where he poked fun at politics and hypocrisy with sharp humor. He learned to use satire as a tool to question authority, not to mock it. During these years, he also interned at a radio station and learned how to conduct live interviews. That hands-on training prepared him for television long before he knew it. After graduating in 1991, Jake briefly attended film school at USC, but he left soon after to pursue journalism. Around that time, doctors discovered a benign brain tumor. He underwent surgery in his early 20s and recovered fully, but the scare changed him. It reminded him that time is fragile and gave him a deeper urgency about the work he wanted to do. In 1992, he took his first political job in Washington, D.C., working as a press assistant for Senator Daniel Moynihan of New York. His role was demanding. He arranged interviews, managed press logistics, and drafted talking points for the senator. Working under pressure on Capitol Hill taught him how political language worked and how easily it could be twisted. He learned how power moved behind the scenes, and that knowledge later gave his reporting a rare sharpness. He gained respect for Moynihan's intellect and command of detail, traits Jake tried to mirror in his own journalism. The next year, in 1993, he joined the Washington Post magazine. There, he dove into congressional ethics investigations. He interviewed over 50 people for a story about lawmakers accused of financial misconduct. He stayed late at the office, cross-checking every detail, building a reputation for accuracy and fairness. The investigation raised public awareness of how accountability worked, or failed to work, inside Congress. It showed that he wasn't afraid of complex or uncomfortable truths. By 1994, he joined Washington City paper. For 3 years, he covered corruption inside D.C.'s City Hall. His reporting on Mayor Marion Barry's aides revealed misuse of public funds that eventually led to arrests and new policies. He filed Freedom of Information requests, traced financial records, and refused to back off when doors closed in his face. His determination earned him a reputation as a fearless reporter who valued truth over convenience. Jake Tapper's rise really began in the late 1990s, when Washington felt like a pressure cooker and his notebook was always open. In 1998, while working at Washington City paper, he threw himself into the Clinton impeachment story, not just repeating headlines, but digging into the shadows. He got close to House Judiciary Committee staffers who were handling the perjury case against President Bill Clinton. They whispered to him about secret talks and backroom bargaining over how hard to hit the president, and about how everything hinged on 11 key grand jury testimonies in March 1998. All of this was still building when something strange happened in his personal life. On December 23, 1997, just weeks before the scandal exploded, he went on a blind date with a young woman nobody knew yet. Her name was Monica Lewinsky. He wrote about that date with a mix of humor and discomfort. In an article published on January 30, 1998, he gave it what he called a B-, described her as sweet and nice, and wrapped the whole thing in a mock tabloid style with headlines like "2-bit romance" and "Monica lent me a quarter." On the surface, it was playful, but underneath he was poking fun at the way Washington turned private lives into circus posters. The piece captured the city's obsession with scandal so well that it earned him a Society of Professional Journalists award, and suddenly his phone started ringing more. Salon brought him in. Meanwhile, the impeachment drama grew harsher. Staffers told him that Republicans were using the memory of a 537-vote edge in Florida as a kind of psychological weapon, the same bare margin they would later cling to in the election fight, to keep pressure high in perjury talks. When the House finally voted on December 19, 1998, the charge of perjury passed by a vote of 228 to 206. When it reached the Senate, acquittal came on February 12, 1999, with a vote of 45 to 55. Tapper's reporting from the committee wing showed how close the president had come to something far worse. Judiciary aides told him about immunity deals for witnesses like Betty Curry, about 18 tape-recorded calls that prosecutors leaned on, and about how Clinton's team barely escaped what could have been as many as 20 felony counts. That kind of gritty inside access, born out of a blind date and a political storm, pulled him out of the world of anonymous freelancers and shoved him into the circle of people who were suddenly taken very seriously. But that kind of work came with burnout. By 1999, deadlines, politics, and long nights pushed him toward TV. ABC News brought him in to produce for Nightline, and his first piece focused on something no one saw coming. On November 3, 1998, Jesse Ventura, a former wrestler, won the Minnesota governor race with 37% of the vote, beating Norm Coleman and Skip Humphrey. Tapper was fascinated. He turned it into a book the following year called Body Slam: The Jesse Ventura Story, published by St. Martin's Press in 1999. It broke down how Ventura's 0.4% primary margin and 793,000 votes stunned Washington. While producing for Nightline until 2001, Tapper covered Ventura's early term, including his push for a $30,000 annual salary and the firing of 200 state workers. His fast edits and sharp pacing lifted Nightline's ratings by 12% that year. After September 11, 2001, Tapper took his storytelling to the front lines. As a Nightline producer, He helped coordinate embeds in Afghanistan just as the U.S. invasion began on October 7th. His team gathered footage from the field, 200 hours of it, while under constant threat. They interviewed 23 Taliban defectors, including one who surrendered on November 14th after U.S. bombs killed 87 fighters near Kabul. His broadcasts revealed the Taliban's internal chaos and 1,200 executions of dissenters since 1996. The footage showed the Northern Alliance seizing Mazar-e-Sharif on November 9th and 400 Taliban surrendering soon after. One defector, Mullah Wakil, told him that bin Laden escaped to Tora Bora on December 12th with $20 million in cash. On December 20th, ABC sent an internal memo praising Tapper for his precision under pressure, saying his team gave the most human view of the war's first stage. That same year, he co-authored Down and Dirty, The Plot to Steal the Presidency, released October 16, 2001. It dove deep into the Florida recount disaster of 2000. Using 1,200 pages of transcripts, he explained how 18,000 undervotes in Palm Beach and the butterfly ballot errors flipped the outcome, giving Bush his 537-vote win, certified November 26th. He traced the chaos to the Brooks Brothers riot on November 22nd that halted the Miami-Dade hand count. The book even referenced the Nork audit that suggested Gore could have won by 60 to 171 votes under certain conditions. Published in the haze after 9/11, it still sold 50,000 copies that first year, proving Tapper wasn't just a war reporter. He was now a political investigator with a national voice. In October 2001, he reported through the fear of the anthrax attacks in D.C. When letters postmarked from Trenton arrived in Senate offices on October 15th, Tapper rushed to the Brentwood Postal Facility, where two workers, Joseph Kersine Jr. and Thomas Morris Jr., later died. He interviewed 14 employees who tested positive and reported live as CDC confirmed the spores matched the Ames strain on October 24th. He described how 1.2 million pieces of mail were processed daily with no detection systems, and how contamination spread to 15 spots inside the facility. His coverage between October 26th and 31 showed the FBI's fumbling investigation, which didn't name Bruce Evans as a suspect until nearly a decade later. By 2003, ABC sent him to Iraq. The invasion had just begun, and he embedded with U.S. Marines in Fallujah, one of the deadliest cities on the planet. Tapper slept in the dirt beside the soldiers and moved through bombed-out streets. Every block held danger: snipers, mortars, hidden explosives tucked into cars or debris. He interviewed troops who said they feared IEDs more than anything else, knowing one wrong turn could end a life. Those raw moments shaped the honesty of his reporting and gave viewers an unfiltered glimpse of what combat really felt like. 2 years later, in 2005, he stood in the drowned ruins of New Orleans. Hurricane Katrina had turned the city into an ocean of wreckage. Tapper reported from the flooded streets, where the water reached the second floors of homes. While officials blamed the storm, he and ABC's crew discovered something darker. The levees had failed due to ignored warnings. His reports forced attention on FEMA's broken response systems and the preventable nature of the flooding. ABC's coverage won an Emmy, and his work helped shift national focus from weather to accountability. Between 2006 and 2008, he worked behind the scenes on ABC's This Week, shaping segments on national security. He helped produce investigations into the legal black hole of Guantanamo Bay, crafting questions that cornered officials into acknowledging that many detainees had never been charged. His scripts gave the show a harder edge that challenged the Bush administration's justifications for torture and secrecy. By 2007, Tapper was back in Afghanistan, this time reporting from a convoy that fell under Taliban fire. He stayed live on air while bullets hit near his vehicle. The experience changed him. He realized journalists weren't just witnesses anymore. They were targets. His later reports explained how the Taliban aimed to silence cameras as much as soldiers, proving that truth-telling had become part of the battle itself. In 2008, his coverage of the Iraq troop surge earned him the Merriman Smith Award. It recognized his ability to report under pressure, explaining both the politics and the pain behind the rising death toll. That same precision carried him forward. On November 5, 2008, a day after Barack Obama's victory, ABC named Tapper its senior White House correspondent. He didn't ease into the job. Within weeks, he exposed over 100 undisclosed meetings between lobbyists and transition officials. He revealed 21 defense lobby meetings before ethics rules took effect on January 20, 2009, forcing the White House to admit early missteps. His findings sparked 12 ethics complaints by March. From 2008 to 2010, he kept winning 3 straight Merriman Smith Awards. In 2009, for breaking Tom Daschle's $140,000 tax scandal that ended his nomination for Health Secretary just 11 days after it was announced. In 2010, for revealing that Director of National Intelligence Dennis Blair was forced to resign after a failed Afghanistan review, and in 2011, for his scoop on August 5th that Standard & Poor's would downgrade America's DAA credit rating due to $14.3 trillion into debt. The downgrade hit the next day, shaking markets by 6.7%. He wasn't done. On January 20, 2009, Tapper led ABC's live inauguration coverage of Barack Obama's swearing-in before 1.8 million people in Washington and 38 million viewers nationwide. His coordination of 1 through 200 camera feeds, drone shots, and live crowd reactions across 50 states earned an Emmy for outstanding live coverage. Then came June 2010. Tapper grilled BP CEO Tony Hayward live on air after the Deepwater Horizon explosion killed 11 workers and dumped nearly 5 million barrels of oil into the Gulf. BP's estimates were off by tens of thousands of barrels per day, and Tapper made Hayward admit it on air. Within days, Obama demanded accountability, and BP pledged $20 billion for recovery. Tapper's interview went viral, pulling 5 million views in 2 days and showing that even CEOs could be cornered by facts. Later that year, ABC gave him the anchor seat for This Week. In just 4 months, he landed exclusive interviews with CIA Director Leon Panetta, Vice President Joe Biden, Rahm Emanuel, and Colin Powell. He revealed that the CIA's budget had reached $54 billion and that drone operations had grown 300% since 2008. Ratings rose by 18%, and viewers felt the urgency in his tone. Jake Tapper's next chapter really began in January 2013, when he officially walked into CNN as chief Washington correspondent. It was not his first time covering power. After the 2008 presidential election, he had already been elevated to senior White House correspondent at ABC News, learning how pressure works from the inside. Still, CNN moved fast with him. Just 2 months later, in March 2013, he launched a weekday show of his own called The Lead with Jake Tapper. From the start, the show felt different. It slowed things down just enough to dig deeper. Political scandals were not rushed. They were examined. One of the earliest and most explosive stories was Benghazi. Tapper's team secured exclusive State Department emails that exposed internal diplomatic tension during the attack and the messy aftermath. Viewers noticed. So did the industry. In its first year alone, the show won 3 national headliner awards, including recognition for coverage of the Boston Marathon bombing, and earned multiple Emmy nominations. With each report, Tapper's reputation grew as someone tough but fair, direct but grounded. someone willing to ask uncomfortable questions without turning the moment into theater. That momentum carried him forward. In June 2015, CNN handed him the keys to its Sunday morning flagship, State of the Union. It was a quiet but powerful signal. Tapper was no longer just part of the conversation, he was shaping it. Then came the 2016 election, a non-stop storm that tested every journalist covering it. Tapper led a team that would earn the National Headliner Award for best coverage of a major news event. Their reporting focused heavily on the Trump campaign and the debates that followed. One moment stood out above the rest. Tapper pressed Donald Trump directly on his proposal to ban Muslims from entering the United States, pushing him on legal and constitutional limits instead of letting the answers slide. The exchange rippled across cable news. Viewers praised the rigor. Critics noticed the restraint. CNN's ratings climbed as audiences looked for coverage that felt firm but not reckless. For Tapper, this period cemented his standing as one of the defining live interviewers of a deeply divided political era. By April 2021, his role expanded again. CNN named him lead anchor for Washington, D.C. events, placing him at the center of major presidential moments. That responsibility came sharply into focus on April 28, 2021, when he moderated President Joe Biden's first joint address to Congress. The room was historic. The stakes were high. Tapper pressed Biden on the Afghanistan withdrawal timeline, using declassified intelligence to highlight how chaotic the planning had been behind the scenes. His questions balanced praise for accomplishments with scrutiny of internal struggles. Viewership was strong, but the real impact came from how the moment was handled. Analysts later pointed to Tapper's approach as a model for covering power without flinching. Years earlier, he had already shown that instinct. On February 7, 2017, Tapper conducted what became a viral 25-minute interview with White House advisor Kellyanne Conway. During the conversation, Conway referenced the so-called Bowling Green Massacre, an event that never happened, while defending the Trump travel ban. Tapper stopped her. He corrected the record in real time. He pressed again. Eventually, Conway admitted she regretted the statement and apologized for what she called inartful remarks. The segment exploded across the country. President Trump responded by labeling CNN fake news. Weeks later, Conway returned to CNN to apologize again, calling the moment one of the most humbling of her career. For Tapper, it was another example of the line he was willing to hold, even when backlash was guaranteed. That line followed him into one of the biggest television moments of the decade. In June 2024, Tapper co-moderated the presidential debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. 51 million people watched. It became the most viewed debate in years. The format was strict. Microphones were muted. Time limits were enforced. Tapper made sure they stayed that way. His questions focused on inflation, immigration, and presidential fitness. When Biden struggled with several answers, concerns spread quickly among Democrats about his age and stamina. The debate was dissected for weeks. Some criticized the lack of live fact checks. Others praised the control and clarity Tapper maintained in a room charged with tension. That same tension followed him into 2025. In February, Tapper and journalist Alex Thompson released a book titled Original Sin. Built on more than 200 insider interviews, the book argued that the Biden White House had concealed the extent of the president's cognitive decline. It described scripted walks, limited unscripted appearances, and internal acknowledgement that Biden was worse in person than on television after the 2024 debate collapse. According to the authors, 99% of their findings emerged after the election, challenging claims that the media had knowingly ignored warning signs. Insiders confessed to self-deception. Family and staff were described as shielding the president until withdrawal became unavoidable in June 2024. The backlash was immediate. Conservatives said they had been right all along. Democrats accused Tapper of betrayal. Reddit threads exploded. Book tour events were canceled. During a May 20th, 2025 Los Angeles Times chat from his Washington home, Tapper defended the work simply, saying they were lied to. The debate the book sparked went far beyond one presidency. It forced a national conversation about health, power, and how much the public is allowed to know. Amid all of this, Tapper's personal life stayed deliberately quiet. He met his wife, Jennifer Marie Brown, in January 2004 during the Iowa caucuses at a hotel bar in Des Moines. She was working for Planned Parenthood. He was covering the race. They married on September 3, 2006, in a private ceremony near her Missouri hometown, attended by about 100 guests and officiated by Tapper's sister-in-law, Rabbi Lori Hahn Tapper. Together they raised two children, Alice, born in 2008, and Jack, born in 2010, in Washington, D.C. Their home life reflected the same mix of seriousness and warmth that defined his career. Family game nights often turned into policy debates. Alice co-authored a children's book with her father at age 11 and wrote an op-ed for The New York Times, encouraging girls to speak up. Jack stayed mostly out of public view. Their house emphasized discussion, curiosity, and service. That house itself became part of the story. Purchased in 2007 for $1.2 million, the Forest Hills mansion is now valued around $3.2 million. It has 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, a pink front door, and a deck overlooking Rock Creek Park. A home studio was added for remote anchoring. It was a symbol of stability after years spent inside news cycles that never stopped. Even older moments followed him. In December 1997, weeks before the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal broke, Tapper shared a platonic dinner with Monica Lewinsky at a Tex-Mex restaurant in Adams Morgan. He later wrote about it and revisited the story on air in 2021, emphasizing how ordinary moments can become entangled with history. By the time a hot mic caught him snapping, "Give me my show" during the Trump-Putin summit coverage in August 2025, it felt almost inevitable. The pressure had always been there. CNN defended him. Social media laughed. The moment passed. What remained was a career built on connection, confrontation, and the refusal to let things slide quietly.